on the budget of 2023. Well, I'm just start with some initial remarks on what I want to conceptualize a little what we may, what it means to be a people of a country. So what is a budget? The budget lays down the policy of a country by its government, of people's activity, their economic activities, and the relations between economic activity and their existence as humans, broken down to citizenry. Their dynamic existence, not as passive recipients, but as policymakers and as active participants in the policy. But when we look at, or not just this budget, but successive budgets in recent times, they have been seen only as labor and disempowered labor. So what we have is, if you look at the budget of 23, we see that the people, instead of being active participants, are seen as a burden on the economy. So, it raises the question of for whom is the budget? And this was asked earlier too. And to quote Ranil Wickremesinghe here, is the long-term development of a country based on popular decisions or the right decisions? In many cases, popular decisions were taken instead of correct decisions in our country. Even today, many people try to make popular decisions. What was the result of popular ruling tradition? I think this is a translation from Sinhala, so the language is a bit awkward, but anyway, you get the sense. To build a relief economy and a relief mentality. So the people are seen as a burden, and the people are seen as being in the country on sufferance, as though they don't have the right to the benefits. They don't have a right to the existence, but they are on borrowed land. So this has been the kind of neoliberal free market thinking that has been there for a long time. So it's not just this budget, but this budget has kind of highlighted the problems in massively crucial ways, because we are in an economic crisis, and Danshika has been talking about it. We are in a steadily contracting economy of extraordinary proportion. So we also have, this mantra about the fertilizer ban and the removal of VAT that created the crisis, which is there, which has to be taken into account and has to be recognized as the tipping point. But we must also remember that we have been heavily borrowing from private bankers, financial enterprises, plus bilaterally and from the IMF. And we have been borrowing from the IMF from the late 70s onwards, but the rapid borrowing from I forget now how many, but out of the 17 or 16 times of borrowing from the IMF, the rapid pace of borrowing has been in the new millennium. Our revenue is small, 3,000 odd billion, and will continue to dwindle. So all of this then pushed us straight into the arms of the IMF. And then because we decided on paying the debt, the non-payment of the foreign debt and the devaluation of the rupee kind of drove us into the hands of the IMF for the 17th time without any bargaining power. We have put ourselves at the mercy of the IMF, and the IMF has imposed fairly stringent conditions, and its own mantra is debt restructuring, which means reducing the budget deficit. which means cutting down on expenditure. Business is in contraction. Our revenue is low. Given contraction in the global economy, there's no foreseeable growth in the market economy. So in balancing the budget, what is going to happen and what is already happening is the lowering of the living standards of the people. So with the contraction of the economy, and this is something that I'm grappling with, the inflation actually might come down, but prices will remain high because there'll be no circulation of money. The World Bank says that Sri Lankan economy is expected to contract by more than 10% by 23. So the expected revenue for 2023 is 3,400 billion, and it's 1,500 billion more than the budget for 2021. And where is this going to come from? It's going to come from, I mean, it's a projection, so it's going to, but whatever that is going to kind of happen through this, the revenue is going to come through the squeezing of expenditure. Now, Agilan Kadagama says this is a fairy tale budget. So I think, I mean, when we look at all the budget provisions, I'm kind of rushing a bit here because we're out of time. We see that, this is not going to be implemented. So this is actually a lie of a budget. And unfortunately, we have to go through the budget to kind of even study it. But when we look at all the allocations and you kind of think, this institution, University for History, this institution will be built for that and this for this, and there'll be all this. If you study, I mean, there are 100 million for this, 200 million for another thing, and then you don't know, I mean, for what it is and what purpose is going to solve, and whether it would even be implemented. But let me look at the policy. The policy, according to Ranil Wickramasinghe, is an export-oriented policy, and the policy hinges on modernization and reforms and reorganization. Modernization involves an export-oriented competitive economy. These are his words, an economy. And in actual implementation, this involves open court. It is imperative to achieve rapid economic growth, for which the entire potential of the country must be tapped. Re-examination of the country's resource base, as well as its reorganization, is re-examination of the country's resource base, as well as its reorganization, is important. Education, health, agriculture, marine resources, industry, all of this would be modernized. We should carry out the socio-economic transformation in the global context. In particular, special attention should be paid to climate change. I think he just puts that there. But look at what he understands as resources. All that we have understood as important country as for the existence and for the economic activity: education, health, agriculture, marine resources, have been turned into commodities. I mean, if you go through the entire budget, they are all being turned into exportable. Even agriculture, there's emphasis on exportable crops. When it comes to the seas, there's something about fishing, but, inland fishing and protection of fishing, but there is also importance given to tourism. Then agriculture there's importance given to exportable. Education, there's very little budgetary, it's 1% of the GDP. That is for education, and I don't quite know how much, but health, I will come to health later, but education is very little, but a lot is promised, but there's very little allocation for it. And that's not only in this budget. I mean, for the last few years, 4 or 5 years, allocation investment in education has been steadily going down. So every modernization here means commodifying every resource and activity. And these are primary activities that, that allow people to live. And in these times of great suffering, where, the huge informal sectors, livelihood, earnings have come down by 50%. The erosion into these areas, these sectors is going to be phenomenal. And I think Danishka was also talking about it. Now, 43 billion is allocated for safety nets, one of the largest single entities. This is another fairy tale. For while the allocation is there, whether it will be handed out or not, there's no, I don't think many of these things will actually be implemented, because we know that from our previous past experience. But even if it's going to be handed out, this will be implemented. There's no supporting activity that will generate a livelihood for those who are a part of this very vulnerable working class community. So, there is no activity, no economic activity that's generated that will kind of give them a continuity and economic stability within the country. Because export, there's no revenue, there's no money there. As Danishka said, there's no investment that's coming this way. So there is a projection on the export economy that doesn't make sense at all. Then we have privatization of key services, and like the telecom. Now, telecom was already 50% privatized, and while the tariff has gone up, one does not know why it needs to be further privatized. Is it because, and I am puzzling this out, is it to undermine labor relations? Some years ago, workers from manpower companies struggled to find recognition of their service, and they struggled to find stability in the telecom. So, is it a part of a series of privatization initiatives that the government is proposing, or this is to tell the IMF that they want to privatize? But as Rashka said, why are you privatizing profitable enterprises? Now, when it comes to health, I think Ramya is there. Ramya Kumar's detailed analysis of current policy on healthcare provision in last Tuesday's The Island is a must read for those who are interested in how the healthcare system works. Reading the budget through her eyes, the items on healthcare, recruitment to the universities, and the brain drain, I am prompted to say that this government's approach to health favors the already privileged and the urban populaces. One is about getting rid of the, increasing merit recruitment to universities by 10%, making it 50, is going to create a problem, not only in terms of disenfranchising a lot of the people in the rural areas, but also in creating an imbalance that's already there between the urban areas and the rural areas. Ramya Kumar has also talked about the brain drain that's very happening at a frightening pace among doctors. Along with this, I had heard, and I don't know whether this probably was not quite implemented, that they had difficulties in paying incoming new recruits to the health service, doctors, that might have been resolved. But there was a time when that was also in question. So, and this is happening at a time when the government, the budget also proposes a new medical faculty in Uber Wellness University. Now, I'm of the view that this would be a paying university. And while we all struggled against SITEM, which is a private university for medicine, now we are thinking that a private medical faculty is going to be brought in through the public university system. and will be there to attract foreign students. Now, I seriously doubt, going by past experience, that there are going to be large numbers of foreign students coming. We don't have the kind of infrastructure, manpower, plus facilities for maintaining like a university like Manipal or something like that, or even in Bangladesh, even going by this kind of criteria. So there is a lot of promise. There are so many of these promises are there, and so many kind of grandiose schemes, which are not going to be feasible at all. We're also going to introduce paying wards in many of the hospitals, and in bringing in paying wards, I'm kind of wondering whether a larger number of middle class people will now start going to the to the hospitals, and whether there would be greater investment. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Now, insurance schemes for students. Instead of enhancing and securing healthcare in the state system for them, the budget proposes an insurance scheme for students to have private care, scholarships for students to go abroad after the A levels. Now, why? I mean, while you are undermining the university system in the public university system, you're trying to provide scholarships to study in foreign universities. I mean, so it doesn't make sense. Is it for a certain class of people, or I mean, what is the logic behind it? Again, and I mean, there are silly things like internet services in all schools. Now, my department in Peradeniya, hasn't had a computer for a long time. There's one in the office, not for the staff, and our internet service doesn't work in our area. So I mean, and it's totally run down. We take our laptops with our own Wi-Fi systems to the university. So this is again, I mean, something kind of it is an IMF budget. Now, there's something in the ETF. There's a proposal. I mean, these are dangerous things. Internet service in schools, we can ignore. But ETF to contribute to insurance schemes, this is not quite legal now, I think. But the act is going to be amended. This can be a violation of the employees' rights. So altogether, we see a threat to labor protection. The informal labor has heavily lost. And so, I mean, and the formal or semi-formalized labor, I mean, it is stated there in the budget that protection has to be given both to the employer and the employee. And what does that mean? I mean, the employer has always been protected. So now suddenly in the budget, you find that protection has to be offered to, or given, the employer has to be protected. That means an abrogation of labor protection. So everything is, I mean, even an agriculture producer is turned into an entrepreneur. Agriculture is about entrepreneurship. Land can be alienated at will, and land alien. So now state lands alienation is also about large takeover by maybe multinationals, maybe BOIs into export or into cash crops and export-oriented markets, which also has led to the instability in our country. I mean, all these successive policies this is a culmination also of what we are facing of successive governments' policies. So on that note, then, so I mean, for me, the budget is is a showpiece. It's reduced. It promises to reduce the budget deficit by an enormous amount. And that means, I have the statistic here somewhere, now I've lost it, yeah. 0.7, the budget, the primary surplus is 0.7, and that's phenomenal. But that's not going to be achieved, and that should not be achieved. Because the problem is, as Dashka said, it's not about the budget deficit. It's about how you create stability through economic activity for the people. And we should have progressive wealth tax and a reduction in the pricing, and support for agriculture and fisheries. And of course, people are suffering now, so there has to be a will to support, school meals. Children in poor areas, they are suffering, they are fainting when they go to school because they don't have. So maybe we should think about transport, school meals, rice subsidies, food subsidies, and that has to, a lot of will has to go into it, but with a kind of IMF oriented outlook and an export oriented outlook and this very class oriented outlook. I don't think that's going to be feasible given our outlook. So how do we then, as a community here, we look at, economic justice. The opening statement was about economic justice, and I think that's how we have to approach this. Sorry, I kind of rushed through this. Thank you.